From fatal shootings on U.S. streets to energy games on the international stage. From protest waves in Iran to the high-profile trial of a CEO murder case that shocked the U.S. And to economic data and vaccine policy controversies affecting people's livelihoods. A series of major events have recently grabbed global attention. These events are about justice, interests, people's livelihood and security, and every twist and turn has far-reaching impacts. Next, let's break down these focus news stories one by one and explore the truth and implications behind them. First off, let's focus on Minneapolis, USA. A fatal shooting by an ICE agent has become the focus of national attention. This tragedy occurred during an immigration crackdown, where 37-year-old mother Renee Good was fatally shot. During a confrontation with ICE agent Jonathan Rose, ABC News obtained a cell phone video taken by the shooting agent, Jonathan Rose himself. This footage, warned to be disturbing, fully records the fatal confrontation that lasted less than a minute. At the start of the video, Rose is slowly approaching the SUV driven by Renee, his figure clearly reflected on the car window. Renee repeatedly tells him, "I'm not mad, man, and it's okay. We don't change license plates every morning," with a very calm attitude. Meanwhile, Renee's partner Becca is also filming the process with a cell phone, while Rose carefully checks Renee's license plate. Subsequently, Rose walks around to the front of the vehicle. Another officer shouts, "Get out of the car," to Renee inside. Becca tries to open the passenger door. Renee turns the steering wheel. The camera shakes downward briefly. And about a second later, Rose, who is still standing, suddenly opens fire. After watching the video, several law enforcement experts pointed out that agents are explicitly required in training not to stand directly in front of or behind a vehicle. However, in actual law enforcement, adrenaline is likely to affect law enforcement officers' judgment and operations, leading to deviations in tactical actions. This incident quickly sparked widespread controversy. Vice President J.D. Vance publicly defended the involved agent, stating that Renee's death was a tragedy of her own making, and shared the new video on social media, claiming, "Many people have been told that this law enforcement officer was not hit by a car, not harassed, yet murdered an innocent woman. But the truth is his life was threatened, and the shooting was in self-defense." Vance also mentioned that Rose was dragged 100 yards by a vehicle during an immigration stop last June, requiring 33 stitches in his leg, implying that this experience may have made Rose more sensitive to vehicle threats. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security also provided relevant video footage from that time as evidence. However, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey has a completely different view of the video. He said, "You can see someone trying to leave in the video, and it's undeniable that the ICE agent was not hit by the car," and emphasized that the investigation may change or form a more comprehensive view, but the facts intuitively presented so far are sufficient to explain the problem. ABC News conducted a frame-by-frame analysis of multiple relevant videos, accurately reconstructing the shooting process. Rose fired the first shot at 9 hours 37 minutes and 13 seconds a.m. The second shot hit Renee about 0.4 seconds later, and the third shot followed 0.3 seconds after that. The entire shooting process was extremely rapid and shocking. The chain reaction triggered by the incident continues to escalate. Protests have broken out in Minneapolis and many other parts of the U.S., with people expressing strong dissatisfaction with excessive law enforcement and immigration law enforcement methods. More notably, the Minnesota Attorney General's office and the Hennepin County Attorney's office stated that they have been excluded from the federal investigation and cannot access key evidence, so they are taking measures to launch an independent investigation. This disconnect between the federal investigation and local law enforcement agencies is considered extremely rare, further exacerbating public concerns about the fairness of the investigation. To make matters worse, just one day after the Minneapolis incident, another shooting by Border Patrol agents occurred in Portland, Oregon, injuring 2 people. The Portland Police Department stated that the injured are associated with the Tiaran de Aragua gang, which was involved in a recent shooting, when the gang members were stopped by Border Patrol agents. The driver allegedly tried to ram the agents with the vehicle, and the agents opened fire in self-defense. Border Patrol Chief Michael Banks explained the situation in detail in an interview. The involved agents were conducting a targeted law enforcement operation at that time, targeting one person with a valid deportation order and another with a criminal record in the U.S. after the agents identified themselves. The suspects attempted to flee and attacked the agents with the vehicle, forcing the agents to open fire. Currently, the two injured have been told by the hospital that they are expected to recover and will be detained and prosecuted for assaulting federal agents after being discharged from the hospital. Portland mayor publicly stated that Portland is not a training ground for militarized agents, a statement that triggered controversy over the collaboration between federal law enforcement agencies and local governments. Chief Banks responded that the U.S. Border Patrol has always hoped to cooperate with all law enforcement partners, but law enforcement agencies in some states have refused to participate in immigration law enforcement-related actions based on policies or state laws. The Portland Police Department was previously invited to participate in joint law enforcement but refused. After this shooting incident, the local police only learned of the situation after receiving a 911 call for help from the injured, and the location of the call was about 40 blocks away from the shooting scene. As protests continue, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security announced that it will send up to 100 additional agents to Minneapolis on top of the approximately 2,000 agents already deployed. This decision has further intensified the tense situation locally. Minneapolis mayor stated that the city government has no jurisdiction over ICE, and if it did, it would never allow ICE to exist in its current form. He also called on the public to stay strong and resilient, not to take the bait, and said the city government is doing everything possible through existing channels to promote ICE's withdrawal, claiming that ICE's presence is not safe for anyone. Renee Good's partner Becca issued a statement remembering the mother of 3 children, saying, "Renee was as warm as the sun. She always believed that kindness exists in the world, and we should do our best to find it." Despite widespread public protests, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security still stated that it will continue to carry out relevant law enforcement operations in Minneapolis. When it comes to international affairs, the U.S. has taken a series of notable actions in the Caribbean region and on the Venezuela issue recently. First, it seized a 5th oil tanker in the Caribbean Sea. And then President Trump summoned CEOs of top U.S. oil companies to the White House to discuss plans to rebuild Venezuela's oil industry and divide up related interests, sparking widespread attention from the international community. Video released by U.S. Southern Command shows that U.S. Navy and Marine Corps personnel boarded the oil tanker and took control smoothly without any conflict. This action occurred just 6 days after Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro arrived in New York to stand trial, making the timing quite meaningful. During the White House meeting, Trump proposed a $100 billion cooperation plan to the participating oil company CEOs. The core is to promote U.S. oil companies to invest in the reconstruction of Venezuela's oil industry, after which Venezuela, the U.S. and relevant companies will share the profits together. Trump promised the CEOs absolute safety guarantees, but did not clearly state whether this safety guarantee would be provided by the U.S. military. He only said, "We will work with Venezuelan leaders and people to form a very safe team, and they will also bring some security forces. These people are no rookies. These people are no rookies. These people are no rookies. These people are no rookies." However, the participating CEOs showed a cautious attitude. Darren Woods, CEO of ExxonMobil, stated bluntly that the company's assets in Venezuela have been seized twice, and to enter the Venezuelan market for the 3rd time, some very significant changes are needed. This statement also reflects the concerns of U.S. oil companies about the investment environment in Venezuela. To fully understand the feasibility of this plan, we need to delve into the current situation of Venezuela's oil industry. As Bob McNally, founder of Rapidan Energy Group and former White House energy advisor under the George W. Bush administration, explained. Although Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves, not all oil has the same extraction value. Venezuela's oil is thick and syrupy, not ordinary liquid oil. The cost of extracting and converting it into a usable state is extremely high, and it contains dangerous chemicals such as metals and sulfur. This means that to achieve large-scale production of Venezuelan oil, huge engineering, logistics, and financial planning capabilities are required, and these capabilities are currently mainly concentrated in US and some European oil companies. Over the past 20 years, due to the lack of such professional support, Venezuela's oil industry has collapsed. The current infrastructure of Venezuela's oil industry is dilapidated and worrying. Large-scale equipment used for extracting heavy oil is in urgent need of maintenance. The oil refining process requires adding light products such as diluents, but the relevant refining facilities are also aging. The power grid cannot operate normally. Oil storage tanks are corroded and damaged, and oil pipelines also have serious problems. The entire industrial system is in a state of disrepair. Bob McNally pointed out that to restore Venezuela's oil production to the previous level of 3 to 4 million barrels per day, it will take several years or even decades, as well as tens of billions of dollars in huge investment. Currently, Venezuela's daily oil production is less than 1 million barrels. For U.S. oil companies, safety guarantees are the primary consideration in their investment decisions. Bob McNally emphasized that the oil industry attaches the same importance to safety as the aviation industry. They need to ensure the personal safety of their employees overseas and the safety of assets. This kind of safety not only includes avoiding direct threats such as armed attacks and gang harassment, but also includes social-level safety such as political stability and good social order in the host country, ensuring the normal supply of food and electricity, and the free flow of personnel and materials. Although the absolute safety promised by the Trump administration caters to the core demands of oil companies, there is currently no clear and feasible plan on how to realize this promise, which is one of the key reasons why CEOs are hesitant to commit to investment. From the perspective of the actual impact on the U.S. public, Bob McNally analyzed that the increase in global oil supply will benefit the U.S. public in the long run, because U.S. gasoline prices are linked to the global oil market, and the increase in global oil supply helps stabilize or even lower oil prices. However, in the short term, even if U.S. oil companies invest in Venezuela immediately, it will be difficult to bring about a significant drop in oil prices. Through simple maintenance and equipment adjustments in the short term, Venezuela may increase oil production by 300,000 to 500,000 barrels per day, but this figure is less than 1% of the global total oil supply, having a negligible impact on U.S. gasoline prices and failing to achieve the expectation of a 50-cent per gallon reduction in gasoline prices. The real substantial impact on the cost of living of the U.S. public may not come until after 2030, when global demand for new oil will increase significantly. If Venezuela's oil industry can be rebuilt, it is expected to play a more important role in the global oil market, thereby having a more obvious impact on oil prices. Currently, this plan is still in the initial discussion stage. The subsequent interactions between the U.S. government, oil companies, and Venezuela, as well as changes in the international situation, will determine the final direction of this $100 billion investment plan. In addition to developments in the Americas, Iran in the Middle East has recently been caught in a wave of large-scale protests. Iran has witnessed the largest protests in decades, with public discontent erupting violently. The protest wave has swept many major cities across the country, including the capital Tehran, where violent scenes such as burning vehicles and attacking government buildings have occurred, and the situation continues to escalate. Videos circulating on social media show that the intensity of the protests is far greater than before. Videos circulating on social media show that the intensity of the protests is far greater than before. Some protesters have clashed directly with security forces, and some have even used flamethrowers against law enforcement personnel. Slogans such as "Down with the Ayatollahs" have been heard in the protest crowds, publicly expressing dissatisfaction with the Iranian regime. The core trigger for these large-scale protests is Iran's deteriorating economic situation and high inflation rate. The living pressure on ordinary people has become increasingly heavy, and their basic living needs are difficult to meet. Long-accumulated dissatisfaction has erupted recently. To curb the spread of protests and prevent people from organizing and coordinating through online and communication tools, the Iranian government has taken extreme measures to cut off national internet and telephone communications, trying to isolate the spread of protest information. But this approach has only further aroused public anger. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei issued a stern warning about the protests, stating that the protesters' actions are destroying their own country and their purpose is only to please the United States, and implied that severe suppression measures will be taken against people who continue to protest. Khamenei's statement is regarded as a signal that the Iranian regime is preparing to step up suppression efforts, triggering international concerns about the humanitarian situation in Iran. The U.S. has made a clear response to the protests in Iran. President Trump publicly expressed support for the Iranian protesters and issued a tough warning to Iranian leaders. "I tell the Iranian leaders, you'd better not start shooting, because we will shoot back." This statement has further intensified tensions between the U.S. and Iran, making the situation in Iran more complex and delicate. According to statistics from human rights organizations, so far, dozens of protesters have been killed and thousands arrested by the Iranian authorities in the protests. Protesters are facing severe suppression from security forces, including shooting and violent dispersal. The humanitarian crisis in Iran has become increasingly severe due to the Iranian government's cutoff of communications and the internet. It is difficult for the outside world to fully and timely understand the real situation of the protests and the number of casualties. Some information can only be confirmed through people who have fled Iran or secretly transmitted video clips. This protest is regarded as one of the most serious political crises in Iran since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, reflecting that the contradiction between the Iranian regime and the people has reached a critical point. Iran's economic difficulties are not formed in the short term. For a long time, multiple factors such as international sanctions and domestic economic policy mistakes have led to Iran's continuous economic recession, soaring inflation rate and high unemployment rate. The younger generation is facing bleak employment prospects and difficult living conditions, which have become the fundamental reasons for the outbreak of the protests. The international community has paid close attention to the situation in Iran. Many countries and international organizations have called on the Iranian authorities to exercise restraint, stop using violence to suppress protesters, and respect the basic rights and demands of the people. At the same time, there are voices worrying that the intervention of external forces may further destabilize the situation in Iran and trigger more serious regional turmoil. Currently, the protests in Iran are still ongoing, and conflicts between security forces and protesters occur from time to time. Whether the Iranian regime can calm this crisis and how to solve the deep-seated economic and social problems in the country have become key factors affecting Iran's future development. The attitudes and actions of external forces such as the U.S. will also have an important impact on the direction of the situation in Iran, and the tense confrontation between the U.S. and Iran may further escalate due to this protest, putting the regional security situation at great risk. Turning our attention back to the U.S. domestic scene, there has been new progress in the high-profile trial of ACO murder case. The trial of the murder case of Brian Thompson, CEO of United Health Group, continues. The suspect, Luigi Moncioni, appeared in federal court again. His defense team and federal prosecutors engaged in fierce confrontation over key issues in the case, with the core controversial focus centered on whether the prosecution has the right to seek the death penalty. Montoni is accused of stalking Brian Thompson and coldly shooting him from behind when Thompson entered a hotel. 5 days after the incident, Montoni was arrested by the police at a McDonald's restaurant in Pennsylvania. So far, he still pleads not guilty to all charges. Montoni's defense team put forward multiple motions in court, strongly opposing the prosecution's request to seek the death penalty. The defense argued that the case has serious legal flaws. The prosecution's charges lack sufficient factual basis and legal support, and at the same time accused the authorities of unfair bias during the investigation. Specifically, after Montoni's arrest, the authorities arranged a dramatic perp walk at Manhattan Pier. The defense regarded this act as deliberately guiding public opinion, causing undue negative impact on Montoni and undermining judicial justice. In addition, the defense also questioned the key evidence proposed to be used by the prosecution, requesting the court to exclude items seized by the police from Montoni's backpack, including the alleged murder weapon, a gun, a notebook, and handwritten notes. The alleged murder weapon, a gun, a notebook, and handwritten notes. The defense claimed that the police search was not in accordance with legal procedures, and the obtained evidence was illegal and should not be admitted by the court. At the same time, the defense also proposed that former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi should recuse herself from the case, on the grounds that she has potential conflicts of interest that may affect the fair trial of the case. During the trial, the judge did not immediately rule on key issues such as the feasibility of the death penalty and the admissibility of evidence. Regarding whether an evidentiary hearing is necessary, the judge's attitude also wavered. Initially, he stated that there is no need to hold an evidentiary hearing similar to the one held by the state court a few weeks ago, and then said that he may reserve this decision and not rule out the possibility of holding a hearing later to further verify whether the items seized from Montoni and his backpack are admissible as evidence. Regarding the trial schedule, the judge gave a preliminary framework. If the request for the death penalty is rejected, the trial of the case may be held in September or October of this autumn. If the prosecution insists on seeking the death penalty and obtains court approval, the trial may be postponed to December of this year or January of next year. It is worth noting that in addition to the federal litigation, there is a corresponding state court litigation process ongoing for this case, which means that Montoni may face two separate trials in the future, conducted by the federal court and the state court respectively, and the trial cycle of the case may be further extended. A notable scene also appeared in the court. Many supporters of Montoni came to the court to show their support, including to women who flew all the way from Sicily, Italy. They called on the judge to be lenient and not sentence Montoni to death. Supporters held signs outside the court to express their support for Montoni, believing that the prosecution's charges have doubts and the death penalty is too severe. Brian Buckmeyer, legal contributor to ABC News, analyzed the case. He pointed out that the defense team is trying to dismantle the prosecution's charges through various legal means, including questioning whether the combination of murder and gun use constitutes a serious violent crime applicable to the death penalty, and whether the stalking charge is established in this case. The core purpose is to make the case not meet the legal conditions for the application of the death penalty. At the same time, issues such as Pam Bondi's conflict of interest and the legality of evidence proposed by the defense are common defense strategies in criminal cases, aiming to weaken the prosecution's charging power and strive for a more favorable litigation result for the defendant. The federal prosecution, on the other hand, insists that Montoni's criminal act is extremely heinous, with particularly serious circumstances and extremely bad social impact, which meets the legal conditions for the application of the death penalty. Therefore, it firmly requests the court to sentence Montoni to death. The prosecution stated that they have sufficient evidence to prove Montoni's criminal facts, including Whitney's testimony, on-site investigation reports, weapon identification results, etc. These evidences form a complete chain of evidence, which is sufficient to support the murder charge against Moncioni and the request for the death penalty. Currently, the trial of the case is still ongoing. The judge needs to review and rule on each motion put forward by the defense one by one, including issues such as the admissibility of evidence, whether to hold an evidentiary hearing, whether Pam Bondi needs to recuse herself, and whether to allow the prosecution to seek the death penalty. These rulings will directly affect the subsequent direction of the case and determine the final penalty Moncioni will face. This murder case involving a well-known corporate CEO has attracted widespread attention from American society due to its particularity and sensitivity. Every progress of the trial has touched the nerves of the public. People expect the court to make a fair ruling, safeguarding both judicial justice and the legitimate rights and interests of the defendant. After focusing on judicial developments, let's take a look at the economic and employment situation in the United States. The latest employment data released by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that the United States added only 50,000 jobs in December 2025. This figure is lower than the general market expectation, reflecting that the recovery trend of the U.S. job market is still relatively weak. However, somewhat reassuringly, the U.S. unemployment rate has dropped slightly, falling from the previous four-year high to 4.4%. This change has given the market a certain degree of confidence in the stability of the U.S. economy. After the release of the employment data, the U.S. stock market performed strongly, with the S&P 500 index hitting a new all-time closing high. This phenomenon seems contradictory, but it actually reflects investors' unique judgment on the current economic situation. The insufficient number of new jobs means there is no risk of economic overheating, and the Federal Reserve is likely to maintain the current monetary policy stance, or even may take interest rate cuts this year to support the job market and economic growth. Investors believe that although the job market has not seen a strong recovery, it has shown certain stable signs, avoiding the worry of economic recession. This moderate recovery trend is conducive to the long-term healthy development of the stock market, as the main index tracking the retirement accounts of most Americans. The S&P 500 index hitting a new high has a positive impact on the wealth status and consumer confidence of the American public. Market analysts pointed out that investors' expectations of the Federal Reserve's interest rate cuts are one of the important factors driving the stock market up. If the Federal Reserve can cut interest rates as scheduled this year, it will reduce the financing costs of enterprises, stimulate enterprises to expand investment and recruitment, further promote economic recovery and employment growth, forming a virtuous cycle. Another important event linked to the job market and stock market dynamics is that a federal judge ruled to block the Trump administration's plan to freeze more than $10 billion in federal child care and family assistance funds. This fund freezing plan involves 5 states: California, Colorado, Illinois, Minnesota, and New York. These 5 states jointly sued the Trump administration, arguing that the government's unilateral act of withholding funds has caused operational chaos in the relevant welfare programs of each state, seriously affecting the assistance work of each state to vulnerable groups. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services (HHS) previously stated that the reason for freezing the funds is the belief that these states are providing benefits to people illegally residing in the United States. However, it is questionable that HHS has not provided any valid evidence to support this claim. Lawyers from the 5 states pointed out in the lawsuit that the Trump administration's move violates relevant legal provisions, exceeds administrative authority, and has not gone through a reasonable decision-making process, seriously damaging the legitimate rights and interests of the states and the vital interests of the people. After the trial, the federal judge supported the claims of the 5 states, ruling that the Trump administration is not allowed to freeze the relevant funds and requiring the government to continue to allocate child care and family assistance funds to each state in accordance with the original regulations. This ruling is regarded as an important victory for the 5 states in their power struggle with the federal government. and also reflects the differences between the U.S. federal and state governments in the implementation of policies. Child care and family assistance funds are crucial to many vulnerable groups in the United States, such as low-income families and single-parent families. The timely disbursement of these funds can ensure the basic living needs of relevant families and support the healthy growth and educational development of children. Support the healthy growth and educational development of children. If the funds are frozen, a large number of welfare programs will be forced to suspend or reduce their scale, directly affecting tens of thousands of families. Directly affecting tens of thousands of families. Directly affecting tens of thousands of families. Currently, the U.S. economy is facing multiple challenges. Currently, the U.S. economy is facing multiple challenges. Problems such as weak recovery of the job market, lingering inflationary pressures. Problems such as weak recovery of the job market, lingering inflationary pressures, and poor policy coordination between the federal and state governments need to be properly resolved. The insufficient number of new jobs added in December indicates that the road to U.S. economic recovery is still long, and the government needs to adopt more effective economic policies to stimulate growth and expand employment. The federal judge's ruling to block the fund freeze has, to a certain extent, ensured the stability of people's livelihood welfare and avoided further impact on the economy and society due to policy changes. Both investors and the public are closely watching the future monetary policy direction of the Federal Reserve and the government's economic stimulus plan. These factors will jointly determine the development trend of the U.S. economy in 2026. In the field of public health related to people's livelihood, a controversial incident has recently occurred. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services (HHS) suddenly announced a major adjustment to the U.S. childhood vaccination schedule on January 5, deciding to remove 6 vaccines that were originally recommended for U.S. children. This decision immediately triggered strong opposition and widespread controversy in the U.S. medical community. The American Academy of Pediatrics, together with more than 200 medical, public health and patient rights organizations, jointly submitted a joint letter to the U.S. Congress, strongly requesting Congress to conduct a comprehensive review of HHS's adjustment. They believe that the adjustment is not based on credible scientific evidence, seriously violates public health principles, and may put U.S. children at greater health risks. The joint letter elaborated on the important significance and remarkable achievements of the original childhood vaccination schedule, according to relevant statistics. The previous vaccine recommendation schedule has successfully avoided about 32 million hospitalizations and more than 1 million deaths, providing an important guarantee for the healthy growth of U.S. children. These vaccines target infectious diseases that pose serious threats to children's health, including measles, polio, whooping cough, etc. Through widespread vaccination, the United States has achieved remarkable results in controlling the spread of these infectious diseases and reducing the incidence and mortality rates. And the health level of children has been significantly improved. The joint organizations pointed out in the letter that HHS's adjustment of the childhood vaccination schedule this time has not undergone sufficient scientific demonstration, nor has it extensively solicited opinions from the medical community and public health experts, let alone explained the specific reasons and scientific basis for the adjustment to the public. This hasty decision-making approach has seriously damaged public trust in the U.S. vaccination schedule and violated the principle of formulating public health policies based on scientific evidence that the United States has long adhered to. Medical experts are worried that after removing these 6 vaccines, the incidence rate of related infectious diseases may rise sharply, and U.S. children will face the threat of these preventable diseases again. The achievements previously made in the field of public health may be lost. The president of the American Academy of Pediatrics stated in an interview that childhood vaccines are one of the most effective means to protect children from infectious diseases. Each recommended vaccine has undergone strict scientific testing and long-term safety and effectiveness verification. HHS's removal of some vaccines without any credible evidence is a disregard for the health rights and interests of U.S. children. Many public health organizations have also issued statements expressing strong opposition to HHS's decision, believing that this adjustment may trigger a serious public health crisis and bring enormous pressure to the U.S. medical system. Faced with strong opposition from the medical community and public doubts, HHS has not given a clear and reasonable explanation. There are reports that HHS's adjustment of the vaccine schedule this time may be related to government budget cuts and changes in policy direction. But these speculations have not been confirmed by HHS. The medical community generally believes that no matter the reason, the formulation of public health policies should not be at the cost of children's health and safety. It is necessary to adhere to the scientific bottom line and fully respect the opinions of experts and public interests. The controversy triggered by this vaccine schedule adjustment has also made the American public question the government's public health decision-making capabilities. Many parents said that they originally had full trust in the U.S. vaccination schedule and would strictly take their children to get vaccinated, according to the recommended schedule. But HHS's sudden adjustment has made them confused and worried, not knowing how to choose, and fearing that their children will miss necessary vaccinations, face health risks. Some parents even said that they will no longer trust HHS's vaccine recommendations and may choose to continue vaccinating their children with the removed vaccines according to the original schedule, which also brings new challenges to the development of vaccination work. Currently, the U.S. Congress has not yet officially responded to the joint letter, but some members of Congress have stated that they will pay attention to the matter and require HHS to give a detailed explanation on the adjustment of the vaccine schedule. The opposition from the medical community continues. Relevant organizations said that they will continue to call on the government to correct this wrong decision through various channels, restore the original recommended childhood vaccination schedule, and ensure the health rights and interests of U.S. children. This incident also highlights the importance of scientific evidence in the formulation of public health policies. Any decision that deviates from science and ignores public interests will face enormous resistance and potential risks. How to balance various factors in policy formulation while adhering to the scientific bottom line of public health has become a problem that the U.S. government needs to seriously think about and solve. The above is all the important news content brought to you today. These events cover various fields such as law enforcement, international affairs, justice, economy, and public health. Their development and direction will have far-reaching impacts on the future. We will also continue to pay attention to relevant developments and bring you timely and accurate reports. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.